Hi everybody, my name is Ben McBride, for those of you who don't know me, and I'm going to be guiding you through this refresher on how to conduct placement tests. Hopefully this video can make us a little bit more aware of how we conduct placement tests for our students, maybe correct some of our bad habits, and in general make the process a little bit more professional and accurate across the board. So I think the first thing to keep in mind when doing level tests is, of course, we have to conduct a placement test in different ways depending on how much time we have, right? So if there are 3 students signed up for an interview over an hour, then we have a lot of time to spend with each student. But if there are 10 students signed up for that same hour, we can't spend as much time. But I think if you have the time, spending a good 8 to 10 minutes with one student really leaves a good impression on our potential students. So I just want to give you an example of what a full-length 8 to 10 minute interview would look like.
Good morning. Go ahead and have a seat. Okay, so we'll take a look at a short video and then I'll ask you some questions and we'll do some talking, okay? So here we go. Okay, so can you tell me what happened to the man in the video when you went to Thailand last year? Yes, exactly. His wallet was stolen. Have you ever had a bad experience while traveling? Okay, cool. Really good job. I'm going to take 1 minute and place you in the correct level. So just sit and relax. I'm going to take a look at the level, okay? All right, so I'm going to put you in SLE level 4. Your grammar is quite good for your level, but one thing that you can work on in your class is fluency. All right, well, it was nice to meet you. Have fun in your class. Good luck.
So in total, the full-length interview might take about 8 minutes. You want to greet the student, play the video, ask some questions, consult the rubric and give a good level for the student, and then talk to the student a little bit about their class options and maybe what some of their strengths and weaknesses are. Sometimes though, the full-length interview is not really feasible. Let's say you've got 8 or 9 or maybe 10 students signed up for an hour of interviews. You're not going to have time to do 8 to 10 minutes with each student. But we need a way to make the interview shorter without sacrificing professionalism or accuracy. So here's a good example of what a shorter 3 to 5 minute interview might look like.
Hi, good afternoon. Yeah, thank you. Can you take a seat here, please? All right. So you chose travel as your topic, right? Okay. So have you taken any trips recently? Okay, great. So if you just sit there for a little bit, I will look at our rubric and give you your level. Anyway, nice to meet you. Please take this to the front desk and have a fun time. Bye.
So with an abbreviated video, the greeting will be a little bit shorter. You won't play the video. You'll ask questions for just around 2 or 3 minutes and then try to put them in an accurate level. So the total time is just going to be 3 or maybe 4 minutes on that. So just to summarize, if you have enough time to do a full 8 to 10 minute interview, that's great. It leaves a really good impression on our students. On the other hand, there are times when you can't really do that. And for those times, do a shorter interview, but make sure you stay consistent and make sure you stay accurate. Probably the most common question that we get about the placement tests is, do I have to follow the topics and the questions provided? And the answer to that is no. The topic list is really there for the students to be able to pick topics that they feel comfortable talking about. And the questions are really designed so that you don't have to make up your own questions. They're there for you to use if you need them and if you want to use them. On the other hand, I know that there are times when the students aren't really interested in the provided topics, or when you want to follow a line of questioning that strays from the questions that are provided, and that's totally fine. So let's consider an example. Let's say a level 1 student walks into the interview room and they've chosen travel as their topic. So you ask them the first question on the list, which is, have you traveled to many countries? And they answer, no, I really hate traveling. Well, the next question that's provided says, which countries would you like to travel to and why? But obviously, in this case, that question doesn't really make any sense. So you can feel free to go off script here and just follow another line of questioning, maybe something like, did you have a bad experience while traveling? And then just continue the conversation from there. Or let's consider another example. Let's say that a level 2 student walks into the interview room and they've chosen food as their topic. But as you're getting ready to play the video, they say, actually, I'm not really that interested in food. Well, this is a case where you can just choose any alternative topic that you kind of have in your arsenal. So you could ask them a question like, okay, well, do you live in Seoul or do you live in Busan? And then just continue to ask them about where they live, what they like about their city, what they don't like about their city, maybe where they would like to live in the future. The point is, if they want to talk about something different or they don't want to talk about one of the topics provided, you can feel free to choose any topics really that you want, anything that's going to interest the student. There's a really important caveat to this though, and that is that the interview does need to have consistency and structure. For the sake of professionalism and for accuracy, we can't really have just an off-the-cuff kind of 5-minute chit-chat with the students. This is becoming increasingly important actually because of the online placement test. It's really growing in popularity, and that's kind of telling us that the students want a consistent test. They don't want just a 5-minute chat with the teacher. They want something that they can perceive of as being valid, a valid test of their ability, and the consistency and structure are a key part of that. So, alternative topics or questions need to be carefully structured and planned if they're going to be consistent. Ideally, they should be written down. Here are some guidelines that can help us to go off book, but in a structured and consistent way. First of all, really carefully consider the flow of your line of questioning. Students are naturally going to want to answer very simply at the beginning of an interview and then with more detail later in the interview. So knowing that, start with a simple question and then move your way toward the more complex questions. You don't want to put them on the spot. The goal here should be to try to get the best quality language that you can out of them. So for example, on the topic of family, maybe you could ask first, do you have a big family? Then move on to something a little bit more complex, like which family member are you more similar to? And then finally, something much more complex, like tell me about the personality of one of your family members. A simple formula that you can use is to start with a yes or no question. Do you have a big family? Then move on to a which, one, and why question, like which family member are you closer to? And then finish with something that asks them to describe or explain something, like describe one of your family members' personality. If we don't really consider the questions that we ask, we lose any sense of consistency that we have from one student to the next. So here's an example of a poorly structured line of questions. Notice how disorganized it is and how hard it is for the student to make good quality responses.
So what kind of traveler would you say you are? Do you like traveling in Korea? Have you ever been to Jeonju before? Well, I went there last month. It was pretty cool, but I thought the food was a bit bland. Don't you think so? Okay, well, very good. I would say probably, level 6 should be good for you, so thanks very much.
Now let's look at a well-structured line of questions.
So to start, Have you ever traveled abroad? Did you have a bad experience there? If I were planning to visit that country, what kind of advice would you give me?
So, if we can keep our questions organized like this, we can feel free to move away from the guide without sacrificing accuracy and professionalism and consistency. The second guideline is to make your questions really explicit. Use language like give examples, describe the process, tell me about their personality. If you're vague about what you want the students to talk about, you're actually just sort of rewarding chattiness and punishing shyness. Remember, confidence is not a part of the rubric. So, for example, if you're talking about food and you say to a student, wow, that sounds really hard to cook, and the student says, no, not really, you shouldn't expect them to just naturally follow up that comment with the recipe. So if you want them to tell you how to cook it, you can just tell them, please describe how to cook it. Third, don't ask a question to test a language point. So don't just ask one question in the simple past, one question in the simple present, and one question in the simple future, and assess their language skill that way. This is kind of the key distinction between a level test and a placement test. In a placement test, the goal is to give them a comfortable environment in which to speak in, to encourage them to use the best language that they're capable of, and then to assess their skill based on the language that they produce. Leading questions, ones designed to find out if they know this language point or that language point, are appropriate for a level test, but not appropriate for a placement test. Finally, I'd just like to mention a few reminders that I think we can all benefit from. First of all, keep the interview focused on your student, not on yourself. So for example, if one of your students starts talking about their recent trip to Spain, make sure that you don't kind of accidentally start talking about your recent trip to Spain and start talking about all the things that you saw and all the things that you did. Keep the conversation focused on the student and what the student saw and what the student did. Of course, some students might be naturally curious about you and might start asking you questions about yourself, but do your best to answer politely and shift the focus of the conversation back onto the students and their ideas. Next, use common sense when it comes to the rubric. The rubric that we use is standardized, and as with anything that is standard, you have to sort of apply it carefully. There are times when if you follow the rubric word for word, you're probably going to put a student in a little bit lower or a little bit higher level than you think that they deserve. If this happens, take your time, go back through the rubric again, and see if maybe you've been applying the letter of the law a little bit too strictly or a little bit too loosely. In the end, your intuition is a really valuable tool as well as the rubric, so don't ignore either of them when it comes to assigning levels. Next, do not mark a student down if you need to clarify a question. So one misheard word shouldn't really make the difference between a level 4 student and a level 3 student. So if a student mishears a word, try to rephrase the question, but don't let it affect the student's comprehension score. Instead, base your score on how much you had to adjust your speaking speed and your pronunciation over the whole course of the interview, not just on one specific question. Finally, if you have time, take a minute with each student and find out what class they plan to register for. Remember, for many students, this interview is the first kind of introduction to what Pagoda is. We all know how important first impressions are. Remember that SLE is not always the only option that's available to students, and in many cases the students' needs might be better met by a different program like PBA or book discussion or any other programs that are offered at your branch. So if there are not too many students waiting, take your time and go over some of the options that are available and ask the students if they have any questions about any of the programs. That extra minute of counseling time really makes a big difference on the student's first impression of Pagoda. And that concludes this placement test refresher. So remember, the main message here is that if you have enough time to sit down with each student for 8 or 10 minutes, it gives a really good impression of Pagoda, and you can make sure that they're in their proper level. On the other hand, if you only have 3 or maybe 4 minutes with each student, there's a way to shorten the interview without sacrificing accuracy and professionalism. If we can do that, we can do a better job of putting students in their proper levels and give students a really good impression of Pagoda from the very beginning. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time.